War movies love slow motion, hero shots, and clean firefights. Real operators say most of it is fantasy, but a handful of films get uncomfortably close to the truth. Not heroic, not glamorous, just tense, messy, and human. These are the ones active Navy SEALs quietly call disturbingly accurate. Number 7. Das Boot. If you ask active Navy SEALs which World War II film feels the most physically real, many don't pick an American movie at all. They point to Das Boot. No swelling speeches, no patriotic crescendos, just steel, sweat, and claustrophobia. Das Boot follows a German U-boat crew during the Battle of the Atlantic. That alone surprises some viewers. The perspective is not allied. It is not triumphant. It is survival-focused, and that shift matters. Operators consistently say, accuracy begins with stripping away propaganda and focusing on the grind. The submarine in Das Boot feels alive in the worst possible way. Pipes leak, gauges shake. The hull groans under pressure. When depth charges explode, it isn't cinematic fireworks. It's terrifying. The boat shudders, bolts strain, men stare at each other in silence, waiting to see if the metal coffin will hold. SEALs who've spent time in confined operational spaces say this is where the film hits hardest. The claustrophobia isn't exaggerated. It's methodical. You feel the lack of oxygen, the sweat, the stench, long stretches of boredom, punctuated by seconds of pure fear. That rhythm mirrors real-world operations more than constant action ever could. There's also no clean hero narrative. The captain is competent, but he's not mythic. He's exhausted. His crew is young, sometimes immature, sometimes terrified. They joke to cope. They complain. They follow orders because there is no alternative. Operators recognize the dynamic immediately. War is rarely about swagger. It's about a procedure under stress. One of the most accurate elements, according to SEALs, is how Das Boot handles waiting. Endless waiting, hours scanning the empty ocean, days tracking distant targets. Real missions often consist of long stretches of monotony interrupted by chaos. Hollywood usually cuts the monotony. Das Boot leans into it. The attack sequences are equally grounded. Torpedoes malfunction, targets escape, victories are uncertain. When something goes wrong, there's no miracle recovery. There's scrambling, shouting, hands moving over controls in tight coordination. That choreography feels authentic because it respects the process. And then there's the psychological weight. The crew celebrates survival, not conquest. When they reach port after a brutal patrol, they are not triumphant. They are drained. And the final moments undercut even that fragile relief. Active operators often say the film's most accurate trait is emotional ambiguity. These men are not framed as cartoon villains. They're sailors trapped in machinery and orders. That nuance reflects how modern operators view historical combatants. Skill and professionalism exist on all sides. Accuracy means acknowledging that. Das Boot doesn't romanticize war beneath the sea. It shows fear in close quarters, systems failing under pressure, leadership under strain. It captures the mechanical and human fragility of combat in a way few films attempt. Disturbingly accurate not because of spectacle, because of suffocation. Number 6. Tora. Most Hollywood war films center on one squad, one hero, one emotional arc. Tora does something very different. It builds war from the ground up. Active Navy SEALs often point to this film when discussing operational realism, not because it focuses on special operations, but because it respects logistics, intelligence, missions, and chain of command. The film chronicles the events leading up to the attack on Pearl Harbor from both American and Japanese perspectives. That dual viewpoint is crucial. There is no single villain monologue. Instead, there are meetings, briefings, miscommunications, missed warnings, paperwork that doesn't move fast enough. Operators frequently say that war is rarely a single dramatic mistake. It's layers of small oversights stacking up. Tora captures that systemic failure in chilling detail. The Japanese planning sequences are methodical. Maps are studied. Aircraft capabilities are debated. Timelines are refined. The American side is equally procedural but fragmented. Intelligence is incomplete. Messages are delayed. Assumptions fill the gaps. SEALs recognize this kind of friction immediately. Missions depend on clarity, and when clarity fails, consequences cascade. The film shows that cascade without dramatizing it beyond recognition. Then, the attack begins. What stands out is how grounded it feels. Planes approach low over water. Anti-aircraft fire erupts chaotically. Pilots shout, but not in theatrical bursts. There is confusion, smoke, men running without clear direction. Explosions are violent, but not stylized. Active operators often note how the film avoids individual hero worship during the chaos. Sailors and officers react instinctively. Some freeze, some fight back, some dive before fully understanding what's happening. That unpredictability mirrors real combat environments. The aerial sequences feel tactile. Aircraft don't perform gravity-defying maneuvers. They move like machines bound by physics. Bombs don't land with perfectly timed dramatic pauses. They hit with blunt finality. Another layer of realism comes from restraint. The film does not insert fictional characters to simplify events. It trusts the audience to follow strategy, command structures, and diplomatic tension. That respect for complexity resonates with modern operators who know operations are rarely clean narratives. There's also an unsettling neutrality. The Japanese pilots are disciplined and focused. The American servicemen are unprepared but not incompetent. The tragedy stems from miscalculation and surprise, not caricatured evil. SEALs often say the film captures something most war movies miss: institutional vulnerability. Even powerful forces can be caught flat-footed. Even well-trained personnel can be overwhelmed by timing and coordination. Tora is disturbingly accurate because it frames war as a machine of decisions. When one cog slips, the entire mechanism collapses. No dramatic orchestral swell can soften that. And that's exactly why operators respect it. Number 5. The thin red line. Most World War II films are built around momentum. They charge forward with mission objectives, tactical victories, and clearly defined heroes. The thin red line does something far less comfortable. It slows down. It drifts between faces and thoughts. And according to many active Navy SEALs, that's exactly why it feels disturbingly accurate. The film centers on American soldiers fighting on Guadalcanal, but it refuses to narrow its focus to one iconic protagonist. Instead, it shifts between perspectives, allowing the audience inside the minds of multiple men. Operators often say combat fractures, perception. You're not experiencing a neatly framed story. You're absorbing fragments, sounds, flashes, stray thoughts that intrude at the worst possible moments. The film captures that internal chaos with eerie precision. One of the most realistic elements is the waiting. Before the firefights erupt, there are long, almost suffocating stretches of stillness. Soldiers move cautiously through tall grass, scanning ridgelines for unseen machine guns. The enemy is often invisible, which amplifies the tension. Active operators consistently point out that most missions aren't constant gunfire. They're anticipation. They're listening for a sound that doesn't belong. When the assault on the hill finally begins, it's not choreographed heroism. It's confusing. Men are pinned down. Orders are shouted and misheard. Some soldiers freeze. Others act on instinct. There's no glamorous slow-motion charge. The camera stays grounded, close to dirt and sweat. SEALs often emphasize that real firefights feel disorienting, not cinematic. The film understands that. Command dynamics also ring true. Officers debate tactics in moments that feel painfully human. One commander is ambitious, eager to push forward regardless of casualties. Another hesitates, weighing the cost. That friction between leadership and the realities on the ground resonates deeply with operators. Decisions made at one level don't always align with what's happening in the grass. The violence itself is blunt. When bullets hit, men drop quickly and without spectacle. There's no extended final monologue. No swelling orchestral cue to signal sacrifice. Just the abrupt absence of someone who was alive seconds ago. Active SEALs frequently say that war is defined by sudden loss, not dramatic exits. The film captures that absence in quiet, lingering shots. What sets the thin red line apart is its attention to psychological weight. Soldiers question why they are there. They reflect on home. They think about nature continuing untouched by human conflict. Those internal monologues might seem poetic, but operators often describe combat as deeply introspective. In the silence between engagements, thoughts get loud, doubt creeps in, memory intrudes. The environment feels oppressive in its beauty. The jungle is lush, almost serene, which creates an unsettling contrast with the violence unfolding inside it. Operators understand that combat zones are rarely barren wastelands. They are often strikingly beautiful places made terrible by circumstance. That contrast amplifies the emotional strain. Another detail SEALs appreciate is how exhaustion accumulates. Uniforms are soaked with sweat. Faces look drawn. There is no cosmetic grit. Fatigue shows in posture and tone. Missions grind people down physically and mentally, and the film doesn't sanitize that attrition. Even the pacing reflects operational reality. The movie doesn't rush from battle to battle. It allows boredom, reflection, and tension to occupy space. Real deployments are not constant crescendos. They are uneven, unpredictable rhythms of calm and chaos. Perhaps most disturbingly accurate is the absence of simple moral framing. The Japanese soldiers are not portrayed as faceless monsters. They are frightened, wounded, and human. Operators understand that professionalism exists on both sides of a battlefield. War is not sustained by cartoon villains. It is sustained by orders and survival. The thin red line doesn't glorify combat. It doesn't condemn it in loud declarations either. It simply observes. It shows how men react when placed under sustained pressure, when leadership falters, when fear and duty collide. Active Navy SEALs often say that authenticity in war films isn't about technical jargon or perfect uniforms. It's about emotional truth, the confusion, the silence, the sudden violence, the way beauty and horror coexist in the same frame. The thin red line captures all of that, and that's why, decades later, operators still call it disturbingly accurate. Number 4. A bridge too far.
Men 300 miles and drop them behind enemy lines.
Most war films narrow their lens. One squad, one objective, one narrow emotional arc the audience can follow from start to finish. A bridge too far does the opposite. It widens the frame until the operation itself becomes the main character. And that scale is exactly why active Navy SEALs often call it disturbingly accurate. The film dramatizes Operation Market Garden, the ambitious Allied attempt to seize key bridges in the Netherlands and punch a path into Germany. On paper, it was bold. Airborne troops would drop deep behind enemy lines. Ground forces would race north to link up with them. Speed and surprise would carry the day. But war on paper is not war in reality. Operators consistently say that the most accurate aspect of A Bridge Too Far is its portrayal of overconfidence layered on top of incomplete intelligence. Commanders believe German resistance is lighter than it truly is. Warning signs exist. Recon photos hint at armored divisions nearby. But the operation moves forward anyway. In real-world missions, friction rarely announces itself loudly. It hides in assumptions. The airborne drops themselves are depicted with restrained realism. Paratroopers float down into open fields, but not into clean landing zones. Units scatter. Equipment gets lost. Radios malfunction. SEALs often point to communication breakdown as one of the most authentic threads running through the film. No matter how well trained a unit is, once coordination falters, chaos creeps in fast. Unlike many Hollywood war films, A Bridge Too Far does not focus exclusively on heroics. It spends significant time in planning rooms, inside transport aircraft, and on the ground where soldiers wait for reinforcements that may never arrive. That waiting, that gnawing uncertainty, resonates deeply with operators. Missions are often defined not by decisive action, but by what fails to materialize. When combat erupts in the streets of Arnhem, it is not stylized. Buildings collapse. Men fire from windows and are immediately cut down. Armor rolls in unexpectedly, shifting the entire balance of the fight. Operators recognize this dynamic instantly. Plans collide with reality, and adaptability becomes survival. Another detail SEALs often highlight is how the film handles leadership under strain. Some commanders remain calm and methodical. Others cling to optimism long after the situation deteriorates. No one is cartoonishly incompetent. They are human. They are making decisions with incomplete information and real consequences. The ground troops racing north to relieve the airborne divisions encounter their own problems. Narrow roads bottleneck armored columns. A single destroyed vehicle can halt the entire advance. Enemy resistance stiffens at critical choke points. Operators understand that terrain can be as decisive as enemy fire. Movement is rarely as fluid as it looks in planning briefings. One of the film's most disturbingly accurate elements is its refusal to provide tidy resolution. Some bridges are taken, others are not. Units are overrun, casualties mount. By the end, the objective remains just out of reach. In real operations, success is often partial. There are gains, but also gaps. A bridge too far leans into that uncomfortable truth. There is also an emotional realism in how soldiers process unfolding disaster. There are moments of quiet humor, even as the situation worsens. There is denial, there is stoicism. There is fatigue settling into posture and voice. Operators frequently say that morale shifts gradually, not dramatically. The film captures that slow erosion. The violence itself feels grounded. Gunfights are sharp and disorienting. Artillery hits without warning. There are no extended speeches before death. Men disappear mid-sentence. That bluntness aligns with how SEALs describe combat: abrupt and unforgiving. What sets A Bridge Too Far apart is its scope without spectacle inflation. The cast is stacked with recognizable faces, but the film never bends reality to elevate a single hero. The operation matters more than individual glory. That institutional focus mirrors how modern operators view large-scale missions. It is rarely about one man saving the day. It is about systems either holding or breaking. The final tone is subdued. Survivors withdraw. Commanders assess. There is no triumphant march. Just acknowledgement that the objective was, quite literally, a bridge too far. Active operators respect that restraint. Not every mission succeeds. Not every gamble pays off. And sometimes, ambition outruns capability. A Bridge Too Far earns its reputation for accuracy, not through special effects, but through honesty about complexity. It shows how coordination can fracture, how optimism can cloud judgment, how brave men can fight hard and still fall short. For active Navy SEALs, that's what makes it disturbingly accurate. It understands that war is not just about courage, it's about consequences. Number 3. Saving Private Ryan. If there is one World War II film active Navy SEALs mention more than any other, it is Saving Private Ryan. Not because it is flawless, not because every tactic is textbook perfect, but because of how it feels. The opening sequence on Omaha Beach changed the standard. Before it, war movies often looked staged. Clean uniforms, stylized explosions, heroic framing. Saving Private Ryan opens with chaos that feels invasive. The landing craft doors drop, and men are cut down instantly. There is no build-up speech, no dramatic pause, just machine gun fire tearing through steel and flesh. Operators consistently say that the first 20 minutes capture sensory overload, better than any film before it. The camera shakes. Sound drops out intermittently, mimicking auditory shock. Commands are shouted but barely heard. Men scramble in water turned red. It's disorienting by design. Real combat, they explain, is confusion before clarity. The detailed work stands out. Soldiers fumble with gear under fire. Some freeze. Some move with grim determination. A medic works frantically over a wounded man while rounds snap overhead. There is no orchestral swell telling you how to feel. The chaos is its own soundtrack. SEALs often note that the scene does not glorify the landing. It presents it as brutal, messy survival. But what keeps Saving Private Ryan on this list is not just Omaha Beach. It is what happens afterward. The mission to retrieve a single paratrooper behind enemy lines feels morally complicated from the start. Operators understand that orders do not always align neatly with personal logic. The squad debates the value of risking 8 men to save 1. That friction feels authentic. Real units question quietly, even when they obey. The dynamics within the squad ring true. There is dark humor, there is resentment, there is professional competence mixed with fatigue. Men argue, but when bullets start flying, they move with cohesion. That balance between friction and unity is something active operators immediately recognize. The film also portrays fear without shame. Characters admit they are scared, hands shake, tempers flare. There is no myth of the fearless warrior. Instead, there is professionalism in the presence of fear. SEALs often stress that courage is not the absence of fear, but functioning despite it. Saving Private Ryan shows that repeatedly. Combat sequences beyond the beach maintain that grounded tone. Urban fighting in the French village is chaotic. Snipers operate methodically. Tanks roll through narrow streets, altering the entire engagement. There is a constant sense that plans can collapse at any moment. No gunfight feels choreographed for style. One scene operators frequently references the slow, agonizing knife fight between two soldiers in a stairwell. It is not cinematic in the traditional sense. It is intimate and horrifying. There is no dramatic music, just breath, strain, and the terrible inevitability of violence. That scene captures the personal nature of close combat in a way few films dare to attempt. The film also respects the process. Clearing buildings is cautious and methodical. Leaders issue commands that reflect real small unit tactics. Mistakes happen, but they are human errors, not plot conveniences. Active SEALs often say that technical authenticity is less important than behavioral authenticity. Saving Private Ryan largely succeeds at both. Another disturbingly accurate element is emotional aftermath. When a squad member dies, there is no immediate rallying speech. There is shock, silence, occasional anger. The unit absorbs the loss and moves on because the mission demands it. That muted processing mirrors how operators describe loss in operational environments. Even the ending avoids simple triumph. The defense of the bridge is costly. Sacrifice is not glamorous. When the surviving it took, there is no celebratory tone, just wait. Saving Private Ryan does not present World War II as a clean narrative of good conquering evil. It presents it as men placed in impossible situations, trying to do their jobs. The uniforms and weapons are period-specific, but human behavior transcends era. That is what makes it resonate with modern operators. Active Navy SEALs often say the film earns its accuracy through discomfort. It does not let the audience stay detached. It forces immersion into fear, noise, moral ambiguity, and loss. It strips away the cinematic polish that once defined the genre. Disturbingly accurate, not because it is perfect, but because it feels close enough to reality to unsettle those who know. Number 2. Letters from Iwo Jima. Most World War II films tell the story from one side of the beach. Letters from Iwo Jima do something far more uncomfortable. It steps behind enemy lines and stays there. And according to many active Navy SEALs, that shift in perspective is exactly why it feels disturbingly accurate. The film focuses on Japanese forces defending Iwo Jima as American troops prepare to invade. There are no grand villain monologues, no cartoonish brutality played for effect. Instead, there are soldiers digging tunnels, rationing food, and writing final letters home. Operators consistently say that one of the most realistic aspects of combat is preparation under inevitability. The defenders in Letters from Iwo Jima know the invasion is coming. They know the odds are stacked against them, and yet they fortify positions anyway. They dig deeper. They plan fields of fire. They rehearse contingency measures. That mindset of disciplined preparation in the face of probable defeat resonates strongly with modern operators. The film's portrayal of defensive strategy is grounded. General Kuribayashi refuses to waste men on suicidal beach charges. Instead, he restructures the defense around tunnel systems and layered resistance. From a tactical standpoint, SEALs often point out how this mirrors real-world thinking. Conserve strength, force the enemy into choke points, maximize terrain advantage. It is methodical, not theatrical. The tunnel networks themselves feel suffocating. Cramped spaces, limited air, minimal light. Soldiers move through narrow corridors carved into volcanic rock. Operators who have trained in confined, low-visibility environments recognize that tension immediately. Combat is not always open terrain and heroic charges. Sometimes it is breathing stale air underground while artillery pounds overhead. When the American assault begins, the chaos is intense but not stylized. Explosions erupt without warning. Positions collapse. Units become isolated. There is no clean line between order and panic. Some soldiers follow commands with discipline. Others break. The film does not shame fear. It acknowledges it as human. That human focus is what SEALs often highlight most. Letters from Iwo Jima spend time on ordinary infantrymen, bakers, farmers, mechanics drafted into a brutal defense. They talk about families. They question ideology. They fear dying far from home. Modern operators consistently say that, regardless of nationality or era, soldiers share that common ground. Professionalism and fear coexist. The leadership portrayal also rings true. Kuribayashi is not depicted as flawless. He is intelligent, strategic, but burdened by limited resources and conflicting expectations from higher command. He understands the hopelessness of the situation, yet he maintains discipline. Operators often say real leadership under fire is about managing morale when outcomes are uncertain. The film captures that strain. There is also a stark realism in how casualties occur. Death is often sudden and unceremonious. A blast, a bullet, a collapse of Earth. There are no dramatic final speeches, just absence. That abruptness mirrors how operators describe battlefield loss. Rarely cinematic, always jarring. The film avoids glorification on both sides. The American forces are not demonized. The Japanese defenders are not sanctified. Instead, the story lingers in the gray. War becomes a collision of duty and survival rather than ideology alone. Active SEALs frequently stress that modern combat demands understanding adversaries as skilled and determined, not caricatures. Letters from Iwo Jima embodies that principle. One of the most disturbingly accurate elements is psychological erosion. As supplies dwindle and hope fades, morale fractures. Some soldiers cling to discipline, others consider surrender. There is tension between honor and practicality. Operators recognize that mental strain accumulates in prolonged engagements. Fatigue reshapes decisions. Even the pacing contributes to its realism. The film does not rush from firefight to firefight. It lingers in tunnels, in quiet conversations, in moments where nothing happens except waiting. That rhythm mirrors operational tempo more closely than the constant spectacle. By the end, there is no triumphant crescendo, only sacrifice and exhaustion. The battlefield is silent except for wind and distant echoes. The letters that once carried hope become relics of men who never returned. It is somber without manipulation. Active Navy SEALs often describe letters from Iwo Jima as disturbingly accurate, not because it mirrors modern tactics exactly, but because it respects the human condition inside war, the fear, the professionalism, the inevitability of loss. It understands that combat is not a spectacle. It is a burden carried by ordinary men in extraordinary circumstances. Number 1. Band of Brothers.
You're not gonna leave, are you?
It is not technically a single movie, it is a mini-series. But when active Navy SEALs talk about World War II portrayals that feel disturbingly accurate, Band of Brothers almost always lands at the top of the list. The reason is simple. It does not compress war into a single mission or a single emotional arc. It follows Easy Company from training through Normandy, Market Garden, Bastogne, and into Germany itself. That extended timeline matters. Operators often say you cannot understand combat unless you see what it does to people over months, not minutes. Band of Brothers allows exhaustion, cohesion, resentment, loyalty, and grief to accumulate naturally. The training sequences are not filler. They establish the psychological and physical foundation of the unit. The relentless marches, the screaming officers, the small humiliations meant to harden recruits. Active SEALs frequently emphasize that elite performance in combat is built on muscle memory and shared hardship. The resentment toward harsh leadership slowly shifts into respect because the training works. When the shooting starts, discipline replaces panic. The D-Day jump into Normandy is chaotic and fragmented. Paratroopers are scattered across the dark countryside. Equipment is lost. Radios malfunction. Units land miles from their intended drop zones. There is no neat formation assembling on cue. Operators recognize that immediate breakdown of order. Even the best planned insertions can fracture under pressure. What matters is how quickly small groups reassemble and adapt. The series captures that, regrouping with remarkable authenticity. Combat itself is not stylized. Gunfights are sharp and disorienting. There is no choreographed ballet of heroics. Men are hit mid-sentence. Mortars land without warning. Clearing buildings is tense and methodical rather than cinematic. Active SEALs often point out that real engagements are about angles, fields of fire, and communication. Band of Brothers respects that tactical detail without turning it into a technical manual. One of the most disturbingly accurate elements is the portrayal of leadership under stress. Some officers inspire confidence, others crumble. Lieutenant Winters, in particular, is shown as calm but not invulnerable. He experiences fear. He carries the weight of decisions that cost lives. Operators frequently say that real leadership in combat is quiet and burdened, not theatrical. The series understands that gravity. The episode centered on Bastogne stands out in conversations with active operators. The freezing cold, the lack of winter gear, the constant artillery barrage. The physical misery becomes as dangerous as the enemy. Fatigue is visible in posture and voice. Sleep deprivation erodes patience. Band of Brothers does not romanticize that suffering. It shows how attrition, not just bullets, wears down a unit. Another layer of realism lies in the bonds between the men. They argue, they mock each other, they protect each other. Loss hits hard because the audience has spent time with these individuals. Operators consistently say that what makes combat survivable is trust inside the team. When one man falls, the emotional shock is immediate and deeply personal. The series allows that grief to linger without melodrama. The portrayal of moral complexity is also notable. The liberation of concentration camps is not presented as a triumphant spectacle. It is stunned, horrified, quiet. The soldiers are not sure how to process what they are seeing. Active SEALs often say that some realities in war do not fit into clean narratives. Band of Brothers acknowledges that discomfort instead of smoothing it over. What truly elevates the series is its refusal to inflate heroism. Acts of bravery occur, but they are treated as extensions of duty rather than grand gestures. The men do what is required because that is their job. There is pride, but there is also fatigue and longing for home. Operators recognize that duality instantly. Professionalism does not eliminate vulnerability. The pacing contributes heavily to its authenticity. There are episodes where combat is sparse and tension builds slowly. Others are relentless. That uneven rhythm mirrors deployment cycles. Long stretches of preparation followed by sudden violence. Moments of calm broken by chaos. Band of Brothers trusts that rhythm instead of forcing constant escalation. Active Navy SEALs often describe authenticity as emotional truth layered over technical credibility. Band of Brothers delivers both. The weapons, uniforms, and tactics are handled with care, but more importantly, the behavior feels right. The fear, the dark humor, the exhaustion, the loyalty. It all rings familiar. It is disturbingly accurate not because it glorifies war, but because it refuses to. It shows what sustained combat does to ordinary men placed in extraordinary circumstances. It honors competence without mythologizing it, and that is why, decades later, many active operators still point to it as the closest portrayal of World War II ever put on screen. Accuracy in war films isn't about bigger explosions or louder speeches. It's about tension, confusion, leadership under strain, and the quiet weight of survival. These films resonate with active operators because they respect the process and the people, not a myth, not a spectacle, just the uncomfortable truth of combat.